both for your time. First of all, I want to begin by asking Dr. Mithal that do you feel that at some level the WHO guideline is going to create some amount of confusion about artificial sugars then being the so bad, asking people not to take it at all unless you're diabetic? Dr. Mithal.
I think when there's public messaging, it tends to be oversimple and the nuances are often lost. And that's the challenge we are facing here also. So the WHO has probably said this because there is a lot of use of artificial sweeteners by people who are not diabetic now. It's more or less become the norm, being added to so much of the food stuff that we consume without even knowing it. And a lot of people pop sweeteners in the hope that that's going to really, help them lose weight and help them become healthier. So in terms of advising sweeteners to people who are just trying to lose weight, it's not a great idea. Actually, trained nutritionists and endocrinologists would never do that. So artificial sweeteners have a limited place. Now, this WHO advisory, of course, people take it as black and white. But yes, in general, it's good to avoid artificial sweeteners for those who are trying to use it solely for the purpose of weight loss. That comes across very clearly. The evidence that these sweeteners produce weight loss or help in weight loss is very flimsy. There are studies that have shown minor weight loss. There are some studies that have shown nothing. And there are some that have actually shown over the long run weight gain. The WHO has looked at 283 studies, right? Yeah. Some are observational studies, some are randomized clinical trials, but often the answer is not clear. So the fact is that when you're using an artificial substance to try and help you to lose weight, and one is not sure at all of what it's doing, plus there is a concern in at least observational studies that there may be adverse effects, including the greater risk of type 2 diabetes or even heart disease or all those things. So obviously, one does not recommend that.
Why can it lead to weight gain? Ms. Ritika, if you could give us a little more idea about that.
So as rightly said by Dr. Mithal, whenever we are talking about a healthy population looking for an alternative for weight loss, and they feel, and of course that's also because of the lot of advertising and the way it has been talked about, that substituting your normal sugar with an artificial sugar would actually help in weight loss. But on the contrary, what happens is that when you start taking them over a period of time, and as we all know, sweet is very, very addictive. It actually works, it gives signal to your brain. Anything, when you take anything sweet, it actually releases some of the so-called the feel-good hormones, which we call dopamine. And you can just imagine when you're taking something like a sweetener, which is almost 200 to 400 times more sweet. And if you're taking it on a regular basis and the consumption is really going overboard, on the contrary, you probably are eating much more without realizing that, you are actually on a weight loss diet, and you probably tend to eat much more. So therefore, over a period of time, as rightly said, it actually can lead to weight gain. Also, we also know for sure, and there are a lot of studies to support that when we talk about sweeteners, it has a direct, impact on the gut microbiome. And we know for sure now that whenever we're talking about gut microbiome, whenever there is a dysbiosis, it can lead to insulin resistance. And that's one of the reasons which actually can lead to weight gain for sure.
So essentially, we're also talking about one of the fallout of using these sweeteners being insulin confusion. Is that what you're referring to, Ritika?
Yeah, definitely. Okay. So it's not directly related to the pancreas, but it is more to do with the signaling of your brains, right? So again, over a period of time, if you've been consistently having it and the doses have been going on the higher side, you would definitely have this so-called the sugar addiction, which might over a period of time would lead to insulin resistance. And of course, if you tend to eat more calories, it will definitely precipitate as weight gain.
Okay. Dr. Mithal, what should diabetics do? Like, for example, a diabetics patient who's been consuming artificial sweeteners or tabletop sweeteners of this nature with their beverage 5 times a day, 5 cups of tea. What should they be doing instead? Because the advice isn't really for diabetics, but by and large, the advice is that one should be refraining from taking this.
So, you see, Sneha, in an ideal world, we should all be trying to get off our sugar cravings and our so-called sweet addiction or sugar addiction, as Ritika was mentioning. And the right way to do it is to actually go on reducing there are various programs that try to do that. Go on reducing your sugar intake or sweet intake so as to sort of desensitize your brain a little bit. Otherwise, when you use these sweeteners, you're actually giving the brain more stimuli of sweetness, so it's harder to get off. So, however, having said that, in the real world, it's sometimes very difficult for people to curtail their sugar intake. And they have a craving for just one or two things in a day, where I don't think that we're going to totally abandon it and say that, no, you can't have, couple of cups of coffee if you just can't avoid it. We say we will encourage you to go off it. Try and go off it, but you don't it's not a crime. It's not an offense to take a little bit of sweetener every day. You can do that if it's helping you curb your calories and helping you curb that spike in sugar, the spike in blood sugar that happens the moment you take sugar. So for that much, it's okay. The problem, I think, is much more in terms of the food that is consumed, which has a lot of artificial sweeteners.
Yes. Ritika, the concern here is that, and a lot of people don't realize that everything around us that claims to be sugar-free has got these artificial sweeteners, and they range from chewing gums to chocolates to juices to everything that's available over the counter, which even kids pick and use, and there is a very little warning that goes with it, that this contains aspartame, for example, and children should not be consuming. You think there's a worry, and that needs to change, Ritika?
Yeah, that's the biggest worry, in fact, so having those, adding one tablet into your tea and coffee is not the problem. The problem here is about the various processed food which we are all taking. And even things like I always tell my patients and people who come and visit me, start reading the labels. So it's not mentioned, but as consumers, probably we never pick up a product and read the labels. So once we start doing that, and as you rightly said, there might be a small write-up there, but it is definitely there for sure. So anything which says a low calorie, says low sugar, says no sugar, says something like additives, probably there is some amount of artificial sweeteners there. And if you can really have a control on what you're eating outside and be aware of the various processed foods which have these. So simple things like sauces, for that matter. We always tell our patients to have a lot of salads because it's very healthy for all of us. But most of us always tell them to add a little sauce so as to make it a little more interesting. Yes. Now remember, most of these sauces would have these additives or the sweeteners. So this is where if we can actually be a little cautious in reading the labels, I think, that will be a real help. And people would be more aware of the total amount of sweeteners which they are probably consuming, not knowing exactly what they're doing. Yeah.
Dr. Mithal, I would say, and this is my presumption and my observation, that the problem really isn't so much about tabletop sweeteners. One is having say a cup or two of tea a day with added sweetener instead of sugar. I think the problem really is that these artificial sweeteners are by and large found on a lot of in a lot of processed foods as well, the consumption of which has become really high over the last few years, and that's the reason why cutting down on artificial sweeteners, which would actually also mean an automatic cut down on processed foods as well. And I think that's what's really important, isn't it?
I completely agree with you. I think the problem lies there. Once I personally did this experiment, I explored all the sugar-free chocolates across the world airports. And the sugar-free chocolates have about 60 to 70% of the calories of the normal chocolate. Yeah. A big bar has 500 calories. The sugar-free one has 320, something like that calories. Now, but people think the moment they're having sugar-free chocolate, they have a license to eat as much as they like because this is sugar-free, for example. So not only are you consuming more calories by having more amounts, more portion size, greater portion size, but you're also consuming more artificial sweeteners. So that's just an example. And clearly, this is important, and this is important for children, especially for children. And I think that's a major area of concern. I think, while it's not reached a stage where you can put on the label, like for tobacco or some others, that this is harmful in that sense, but we should certainly highlight it on labels that artificial sweeteners have been added. At the moment, you don't have enough evidence to finally say that this, unlike for tobacco, I'm using that as an extreme example, there is a direct risk of XYZ disease because studies are conflicting, but there is a suggestion. So, but you can definitely say that artificial sweeteners have been added, and we have to educate the public about being careful and about reading food labels more carefully and not going sort of ad libitum on that.
Yes. I'm just very intrigued because when this warning came in from the World Health Organization, I did actually have a word with one of the nutritionists, one of the first immediate stories that we were filing, and she did say, why are they going after stevia? I can understand aspartame, but why stevia? Many people would say the same for monk fruit extracts, though monk fruit extracts has not been added to this list. Now, Ritika, would you think that there is little information on stevia? At the end of the day, it's also derived from a plant. Many people say we actually use the plant directly, though the US FDA doesn't advise that. Why do you think they've really gone after stevia in that case? Do you think that that's also a little bit of information which is not there on stevia, and this ban should, or not a ban, but this warning against stevia should have not come in?
So right, this is very, very interesting. While of course after this guidelines and the thing came out from WHO, in fact, when I was also going through, it was very recently, as recent as 2015, that the finally FDA gave an approval for stevia also. So before that, we did not have the approval for stevia. Now, though we all understand it's a natural plant extract, but one very important to understand is one should not be taking the leaves directly and taking, because there have been evidences that you have to purify to take it. So if you've been taking the leaves directly, be a little bit more cautious about it and don't go overboard. Okay. The second is we have to understand is that the leaves of the stevia, it's a chemical compound which is present in the leaves, which is actually acting as a sweetener, and that is of course your steviol, which we all know. So again, it has the same impact. It is almost 200 to 300 times as sweet as compared to your sugar. So therefore, it can be added. The third is, in a lot of the products, what we've seen of lately is when they add the stevia, instead of writing stevia, or even if they're writing stevia, the pure form is not added. There are a lot of additives which are added along to it. So in case if it's mentioned like a stevia, it might not be 100% stevia. It might also have something like your sugar alcohols and all, which might be also present. So at the end of the day, what we are trying to inform the public is that, of course, it's not like if you take one tablet, it'll probably lead to a cardiac problem or to a diabetes. But for sure, be very, very aware of the fact that which are the products which are having these, whether it's a sugar or alcohol, whether it's a non-nutritive sweetener which is there, because at the end of the day, it's the total amount which is going to have an impact. And second, I think as nutritionists, what we understand is that whenever you're taking too much of sweet things over a period of time, it becomes addictive. And you, in general, try to consume more of those products, and that would definitely lead to weight gain or probably insulin resistance. So that is the crux which we have to tell the masses, and not saying that this is better than the other or that is worse than the other one. So this is very, very important.
Dr. Mithal, one of the popular things that I've heard even in my office, and a lot of people are going to kill me for picking on them indirectly, is that I'm off Coca-Cola, Coke, any other aerated drink, and I'm having diet colas or diet sodas. It's really popular. It contains aspartame, we know that. And of all the artificial sweeteners, if I can say so, aspartame really is a big gunda, isn't it, when it comes to artificial sweeteners? What advice would you give these people who think that they're drinking healthy just because they're drinking a diet cola?
So, yes, diet colas have become very popular, and they're sort of a go-to kind of drink, when you're trying to cut down your calories. So, yes, you will cut down your calories if you substitute cola with a diet cola. There's no question about that. But a lot comes with it, Firstly, because again, this first problem is that then people consume unlimited amounts. They think there's no zero calories, so I can have any amount. So we forget the other constituents of the cola or whichever drink we are having. Because firstly, of course, it has artificial sweetener, so you'll be consuming that in much higher amounts. But in addition, you have phosphoric acid, you have caffeine. There are some, there's so many constituents there, which if taken in large amounts for prolonged periods can harm you independent of the sugar. It's not just the sugar that is the problem there. So I think an odd diet sort of cola or a cola zero or something is acceptable. Once in a while in a party, people are having colas, you don't want to have that. I would rather go for a diet Coke or a diet cola or something, or Pepsi. But if you use that regularly all the time, again, we are walking into a trap. So I think it's okay to have it when you go out with friends once in a while, rather than have a regular cola. but I don't think it's okay to have it on a regular basis.
Okay.
If you look at some of the clinical guidelines, Mayo Clinic and others, they are say it's okay if you want to stretch it, you can have, maybe a little bit every day, but certainly not large servings. I would be more conservative. I would say maybe if you're going out in the weekend, you have a diet Coke, it's a diet cola, it's all right, but I don't think it should be had on a daily basis, no.
Right. My last question to you is, Ritika, in fact, I want to ask you that the FSSAI has given a very lukewarm sort of a response to this, saying that our scientists are looking into what the WHO has said. For years now, and this data has been in the public domain for years now, as far as aspartame, for example, is concerned. The US FDA still continues to give it a green signal. What do you expect, or what should regulatory authorities world over be doing now, since there is data, and the WHO has also taken a position on artificial sweeteners?
Yeah, so definitely FSSAI, if you go to the website and all, it does speak about, the artificial sweeteners, what is the exceeding limit or what is the maximum limit one person can have it. And again, what are the various processed foods in which you actually get to see the artificial sweetener. So it's all mentioned in the website. But again, as I always feel that probably they have to be a little more active in terms of probably educating the public, because that's the need of the hour. We all know it's bad, but how much is bad? How often can you take it? Where all is it present? Those are the questions which really need to be answered. And I think there have been a lot of discussions in the FSSAI, and they're planning to have a governing body which will be taking into this seriously and would come out with certain suggestions and probably certain pointers which will be there. But definitely, I think to start, as consumers and as the normal public, we should all be very, very aware of the fact that sweeteners are not healthy, especially for the healthy population. And second, whenever you're picking up processed foods, whichever product you're picking up from the rack, please start reading the label. All the informations are there, but seldom do we really actually read the label. So I think if you start doing that, that's also a great step towards probably, moving away from these so-called additives and preservatives and probably leading a healthier life.
All right. I'm going to thank you, Ritika, for joining us and sharing your views with us. A well-known nutritionist there, putting the spotlight on artificial sugars and the conversation around it. Dr. Mithal, as always, great to have you on the show, and thank you for connecting. Viewers, we hope you found this information and this conversation useful, and we hope we've all answered your questions, whatever they may be, around artificial sugars, and your doubts as well have been cleared around fake sugars. Thank you for connecting.